Hello everyone and welcome to Life Begins at 20. My name is Mark and today we have the next instalment of Inside the Cube. If you missed the introduction to the series, there will be a card on the screen now and a link in the description below. In this episode we're going to be diving into the third of our archetypes, which is known as Burn. We will take a look at what the archetype is, how it works, why it's effective, plus the anchor cards for it and how to support it in your cube. Just before we get into the video, I'd like to thank my sponsors for my cube content, the Mana Base, for giving me the opportunity to grow and bring you even better content. For those who don't know who they are, they're a website of fellow Magic the Gathering content creators like myself, bringing you content from all formats. Definitely do check them out over at themanabase.com, as I'm sure you'll enjoy what you see. So back to the episode, and I'm really excited to bring you one of the great archetypes in Cube, and hopefully this will give you a better understanding of the archetype itself, in cube construction and even gameplay if you weren't so sure about it. So let's get stuck in. Many players will have heard of the Burn archetype as it appears regularly in nearly every format of Magic the Gathering. It is well known as a budget option to get into any format. This can be said for supporting it within your cube as well. The archetype was unofficially named by the main goal of the deck, which is to reduce the opponent's life total from 20 to 0 as quickly as possible, utilising cheap, hard-hitting burn spells. This is not to be confused with a red aggro deck, which is predominantly creature-based and uses the spells to clear the way for them, rather than aiming them straight at your opponent. There will be some crossover of cards that fit well into the red aggro deck, but as we talk further about the archetype, you'll start to see the main differences. The Burn archetype is very effective at what it does, which is reducing your opponent's health to 0 as quickly as possible. Once you get to the point with a certain number of spells and lands, this type of deck will end up comboing off for the win. That's why if I had to describe it in one deck type, I would classify this as a combo deck rather than an aggro one, although you could claim that it's an aggressive combo deck. Reducing your opponent's life total to 0 as soon as possible is your sole goal as the player of this deck. Some players may say that operating this deck can be very linear, but I feel there is a different set of skills needed to operate it. Knowing when to cast your burn spells can be key to winning a game. If your opponent plays a creature, do you remove that from the game using one of your spells, or do you hit your opponent's life total instead? Plus, do you use it in your main phase or end of turn? While the concept of burn is simple, often the choices may not be. The deck has a few weaknesses, especially to life gain, counterspell heavy control decks, recurring creatures, and cheating in big threats can definitely be problems. So deciding how you go about playing is key, and hoping that you can combo off before they become a problem. A typical burn deck compromises of a lot of cheap damaging spells, cheap aggressive creatures which benefit from spells being cast, lasting effects that apply a clock to the game, and direct damage spells disguised as creatures, even utility spells which, when certain conditions are met, deal damage to the opponent too. In terms of direct damage spells, every player in Magic will have heard of Lightning Bolt, Chain Lightning and Rift Bolt. These play a main role in a burn deck, having high damage to mana ratios. These are key to the success of a burn deck. Utilising spells like this as removal or direct damage to the opponent will end up, as long as you're not countered, which is a big problem for this deck, outracing your opponent. Cheap creatures in red are often used at a minimum in a burn deck itself, but there are those which have a benefit being played. Goblin Guide is an auto-include in any red deck, but Monastery Swiftspear, Thermo Alchemist and Grim Lavamancer are examples that would have a benefit for your burn spells being cast too, either by pumping them up, dealing extra damage, or utilising the dead cards in your graveyard to do even more. Always useful to have a couple of these in your deck. The same can be said for lasting effects on the board, with the likes of Sulphuric Vortex and Eidolon of the Great Revel. As a huge quantity of burn spells you'll have will cost 3 or less, both of these spells will end up hitting you, but these signify a clock on the game for your opponent, as if they can't deal with them, they will end up losing the game before you do, especially with Sulphuric Vortex stopping your opponent from gaining life, which can be a real issue for this archetype. Then there are burn spells masquerading as creatures. Keldon Marauders, Hellspark Elemental, Ball Lightning with the other equivalent cards as well, and Vexing Devil are all pure damage to your opponent's face, rather than creatures you'll be attacking with regularly that persist on the board. Keldon Marauders, for example, signifies a minimum of 2 damage to the player, and potentially 5 if it gets to swing in. For its mana cost of 2, this certainly does a good job. Last of all, there are utility spells which help your case to win that race. Either cards like Smash to Smithereens, destroying a potential key card of theirs and dealing damage to their face, Price of Progress, which requires your opponent to have non-basics, which shouldn't be unheard of in a cube. This potentially will also hurt yourself, but more often than not, your opponent more. Skullcrack is a great card for not only dealing damage to your opponent, but stopping them from gaining life, which is a major problem for a burn deck. And last of all, lands like Strip Mine are great additions to your decks. As your spells will be a lot cheaper to cast, this could put your opponent behind on mana and certainly help you to win that race. As you can see from this variety of cards, there is more to a burn deck than just picking up all the single target spells and hoping for the best. Although, if you do manage to first pick Sulphuric Vortex, you're well on your way. From this selection of cards, I'm sure you've managed to pick up that the main and only colour required for this deck is red. For these cards, I'll be talking about unpowered powered cubes for the anchor cards, but we'll give a larger list of supporting cards that will give options to peasant and pauper cubes too. So for the powered and unpowered players, if you see cards that won't get into your cube, please don't worry, I'm not saying they should all go in at every power level. Like I mentioned a moment ago, the primary colour you'll need for the burned archetype is red, as this is the colour with access to all the spells and creatures you will need to support it. There are no other colours needed for this specific archetype, so there are no supporting colours. As for the main anchor cards for this archetype, we have a few cards that will do the job well for us. As mentioned before, Sulphuric Vortex is a main anchor card for the burn archetype. It does everything we could ask for in a card. Although it may not be as important as good 1-drops, once in play, because it's a diverse target, it can be difficult to remove. And when it does make the battlefield, the opponent has a limited amount of time to remove it before they end up losing the game. The added benefit is that the card stops the opponent gaining life, which is the biggest threat to burn. The second anchor card for the burn archetype is Hellspark Elemental. There are other cards similar to this which are burn spells masquerading as creatures, plus having trample means more often than not it will be dealing damage to the player. The extra positive here over the others is that with the unearth mechanic you'll get to utilise this creature a second time. The last card I'll be putting forward as an anchor card for burn is Monastery Swiftspear. This is right up there as one of the best 1-drops in red, and this card can provide a significant amount of damage throughout the game thanks to prowess. Some turns you'll be able to trigger this anywhere up to 4 times, maybe even more. This is the perfect beater in addition to all the spells you'll be casting to your opponent's face. As for the supporting cards for this archetype, there are plenty to choose from. In the form of Planeswalkers, we have 2 that do a good job for us, Koth of the Hammer and Chandra Torch of Defiance. Both of these represent significant damage and, being Planeswalkers, often difficult to remove. Koth's realistically a 4/4 haste creature swinging in for extra damage every single turn, whilst his ultimate isn't too difficult to achieve either and game ending in a turn or 2. As for Chandra, she's a very versatile planeswalker who can either card draw, deal more damage on the turn she comes out, or ramp for another burn spell, which is great. She definitely makes use of 2 damage per land drawn as well. Her ultimate is something that is also very achievable if the game drags out that long, and once activated, the opponent really hasn't got much time left. Moving on to the creatures, and we look at a variety here. First up, we have the spells masquerading as creatures. So first up, we have Eidolon of the Great Revel, Hell's Thunder, Blistering Firecat, Ball Lightning, and Impetuous Devils. Although Impetuous Devils is slightly weaker of the 3 Ball Lightning style creatures, but the fact that a target creature has to block makes this really strong at getting rid of a big threat on their side of the board while getting in for a little extra damage. Keldon Marauders, Harsh Mentor from the newest set of Amonkhet punishes the opponent's plays more than you'd think, and Vexing Devil are all of those single target spells hidden in creature form. The next set are those creatures which benefit from spells like Gutter Snipe, Kiln Fiend, Thermo Alchemist, Chandra's Phoenix, Chandra Fire of Kaladesh, which has the benefit of pinging regularly and then flipping over to protect herself better in a Planeswalker form, Grim Lavamancer and Goblin Dark Dwellers. Each of these do a good job for you for that sustained damage or finishes in some cases. I won't mention all of the red burn spells that you'll typically find in cubes, but the burn spells that really help to support this archetype are Lava Spike, Skullcrack, Smash to Smithereens, Flames of the Bloodhand, Pulse of the Forge, Price of Progress, Incendiary Flow, Exquisite Firecraft, Fire Blast, Rift Bolt, Needle Drop, and Flame Rift. These, in addition to typical burn spells like Chain Lightning, Lightning Bolt, and so on, will really help cubes of all levels support this. There are a couple of utility cards that are also strong with this archetype to help support it. For artifacts we have Shrine of Burning Rage, which gives you even more value from the spells you've played, along with Barbarian Ring for that little extra damage when you have enough lands in play, along with Strip Mine and Wasteland to put your opponent's mana curve behind. There are obviously more cards in Magic that can do what we need in each of these card types, but these are a good selection of some of the newer and more commonly found in cubes. As you may have already guessed, this archetype cross-pollinates well with another archetype looking for similar cards, and that is the Spells Matter archetype. This one is predominantly played around the colours red and blue and shares a lot of the same cards from Burn. The inclusion of blue will allow you to utilise card manipulation and counter spells to make sure that your burn spells do a lot more, especially with a large number of creatures that utilise instant and sorcery spell triggers. You'll also certainly find Gutter Snipe, Monastery Swiftspear and Kiln Fiend a home in here too, not to mention so many of the burn spells. This is another really fun archetype that is getting a lot more cards to improve it as each set comes out. So in summary, this handy table will be a rough guide to what we have already talked about in this video. Please feel free to pause the video and use it as a handy reference for how to support the archetype in your cubes. There may well be some more cards that will help support this archetype in all power levels of cube, so feel free to add these in the comment section below for the other viewers to see. I personally really enjoy playing this archetype in cube. It's really fun and can often be very rewarding. If you like the challenge of playing around your opponent, flinging plenty of spells at them to kill them as soon as possible, then this is definitely something for you. If this is something you like the look of and haven't supported it yet, it's really straightforward to incorporate it into your cube and add another dimension to your gameplay. In the next episode of Inside the Cube, we're going to be talking about another very common archetype in the form of Super Ramp, so definitely stay tuned for that. I'd like to again thank the Mana Base for sponsoring this video and adding me to their list of great content creators. Definitely do check them out at themanabase.com, as I'm sure all your format needs will be covered from Pauper to Limited and Cube. Definitely do check them out. Just to remind you that I'm currently doing a 750 subscriber giveaway, giving you the opportunity to win an Amonkhet bundle. There will be a link in the description below of how to enter that. The closing date is at the end of May, so there is still time left to enter. As I've just passed 1,000 subscribers this week, I'll be doing a Q&A video on Tuesday, so it's not too late to ask any questions, just leave them in the comment section below for me. If you enjoyed the video, hit that like button, share it, and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already for new videos every Tuesday and Friday. Don't forget to hit that notification button to know when each video is uploaded. With your support, we can really help the channel to grow. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.